Welcome to another chapter of our Planning for Your Marketplace webinar. Today, we will be going over timelines. Let's get started.
So one of the things that helps with that, kind of leading us into the next thing, and it's kind of the sister to budget and timeline always go together, right? So let's talk a little bit about the timeline. I like what you said. You used a comment ago a minute about, you said, make sure you do phases, right? Go ahead and explain to the group here what you're talking about that when it comes to, the difference between maybe the MVP and what are these quote unquote phases? And do you have any ideas around what those phases might be?
Yeah, that's a great comment. And I could not agree more about disruption and being able to sort of get people's attention. And one of the things I want to point out as we move over to timeline is that one of the classic things about marketing and being able to be disruptive in a positive way is to provide a ton of value. And if you niche down and think about your areas of value, like really just think about it and ask yourself, where can I really genuinely help? That's where you should focus. And you should evangelize that. And then it's just going to pour out from you that you're genuinely wanting to help. And that is so convincing and convicting for anyone that hears it. They know it when they see it. And so we just encourage you to think about that. And like you said, Ron, that should be part of your ongoing operating plan. And you can take out bigger competitors by providing more value. I mean, substantially, that's what people are looking for in the market. That's a beautiful thing. And yeah, I would say the timeline is really interesting in this way because depends on your situation and depends on your capitalization and how much you want to put into this kind of the capital outlay for your project. A lot of our clients have really successful marketplaces already, and they know that they need certain baseline functionality and customizations, integrations, etc. And so, of course, to the extent that that's the case for you as well, we want to encourage you that, we don't want to relearn anything. That would be silly. We want to take advantage of everything that you know about your market, everything we know about marketplace in general, etc. With that said, it is quite possible to build this out in phases. And an example of this would be you may have a specific niche within your market, within your marketplace that you can focus on to deliver a full solution with your new system, with your new marketplace project, and deliver that for that niche as a sort of first phase or an MVP, and focus on that exclusively, get everything working in that sort of lower risk environment, and validate that it is in fact working and providing the value that's needed. Substantially, what I've found, and this is just an experience that I think is pretty consistent for anyone who's honest about their experience working on really anything that's complex. Doesn't just involve software, but anything that's complex, it's relatively challenging to project all of the potential timeline issues or actual technical issues or bugs until you sort of get in the weeds. And then there's a difference between testing in a testing environment and how everyone thinks about it versus production. And
right.
There's nothing like having an MVP to push into production in a smaller subset of work, a smaller unit of work that is working software that is pushed into production, even if, again, it's not really a main line or it's not necessarily, a risk for the business. The nature of pushing things into production, this is a forcing function to establish, best practices for a group of people. And no matter how disciplined and how excellent they are and how much experience they have, this is typically a positive thing. So that's why you see in software a lot of times, there's this exponential decay in value with larger capital allotment. Like you put more money in, but you don't necessarily get a linear increase with more money, more results. A lot of times it's with more money, you actually get less results. And so you have to be careful and take it in chunks and measure the performance. And so that's why you see a lot of Agile Scrum, breaking the work into chunks. And that's where we have this idea of an MVP. And, you can do this in different ways. A lot of what we like to do, because a lot of our clients know what they need as a baseline. Again, they have experience with successfully operating a marketplace. We know that they need, at least, I don't know, 6 months of effort to be expended to get what they need done. But during the course of that 6 months, we need to be, reconciling every month that everything is working from that month that we completed. And that's a really healthy best practice as well. I don't know if you want to chime in there on that, Ron, and thoughts on this, depending on where the business is at as well.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Gosh, what do I say? I mean, you and I work together now 13 years, and we've together seen well over 1,000 projects. What do we say on timeline? I'm trying to remember, there was a Harvard quote that says 97% of all projects go over budget and overtime, right? So this section we're talking about, this particular video, planning is by far and away the most important. And timeline is one of them, because that's one that seems to kill people a lot, right? Is that they make their plans for their project around some event coming up, or they put some hard timeline on something. The thing is we're dealing with software, we're dealing with customizations. And I like to, whenever I sell a project, I like to have a first initial kickoff meeting. And one of the tips and tricks I give them is I'm like to say, look, this is like going to war. The success of your project is not tied to how well your project goes at all, because you're going to run into issues. And the issues can be technical. They can be somebody getting sick and missing a day. I mean, what happens when your developer who is in the middle of a sprint gets sick and they get COVID? You can't plan for that, right? And that can affect the timeline. It's not like you can just bring another developer in off another project that's in the middle of their sprint and they can just pick up and go forward and finish out your sprint. I mean, it literally affects the project. So you need to plan for issues, and you need to plan on how you're going to address those issues. So you need to have contingencies built into the timeline as well, not just the budget, but how are you going to work with this vendor? I always like to say the success of your project is directly tied to how well you work with your vendor when these issues arise. And the thing is you don't know what those issues are going to be. They could be budgetary, they could be technical, they could be timeline. You could have someone get sick, someone could leave your team, you could have somebody quit. I mean, it doesn't really matter what it is. I've had customers that are launching products and we're building their website to launch the product, and they had problems with the product going into production and their product delayed. And they had PR and press releases and all kinds of things aligned, and it all just fell apart. And they had no contingency plan, right? And it was all on their end. So with timeline, really the best thing is plan, make contingencies, and understand there are going to be issues with your timeline. And that's really where a good relationship with your project manager helps, because really all you need is full transparency, right? Hey, I think there's going to be a problem. So-and-so's out with COVID. It might affect this thing. Okay, what's our contingency? What's our risk plan? What are we going to do? And so the way Chris articulated the different phases, part of making those different phases on paper and able to help address these types of issues might be prioritizing them, right? Okay, well, here's the 27 features we're hoping to have in the Panacea. This is every single one of them. You know, these 3, yeah, they're a dream. We doubt we're going to have them. We doubt we're going to be able to afford them. But if we could get them, man, that would be really cool. Great. Well, let's put that out there as the lowest priority. Those are 5s. Here's a couple that are 4s that if something happens, we can move these out. We don't have to have them. And then when you get into the 1s, 2s, and 3s, 1s are, we can't launch the MVP in this limited release like Chris just talked about. Those are the 1s. 2s are, man, this would be great. If we could get any of these in here, this would be great. But if we don't get them in the initial MVP, these are immediately the things we're going to start working on. And then 3s would be the stretch, right? So you've got your have to have, you've got your goal, and then you've got your stretch. And then you've got this other bucket that if they don't get done, you know that in the next 6 months, once you launch, once you get going, those are going to be the next steps, the things you're going to be working on. You always have a plan. So I think that covered timeline. Do you have anything else you want to add on timeline before we go into government? governance.
I just
and
wanted to
policies.
reinforce that what you said about prioritizing and those details around basically putting numbers on them. That is so helpful for communicating within the group, and both within your internal team and with your partners that you're working with. So I think that's a great way to articulate that.
Thanks for watching an episode of our Marketplace Webinar Chapter Series. Join Chris and Ron on our next video where they will cover governance. See you there.